Hey guys, today we're diving into a topic that affects every household: how to eat well without breaking the bank. Now, in today's episode, we're going to be thrilled to be joined by Kimberley Gillen, an author of How Low Can You Go? A guide to mastering budget friendly grocery shopping while maintaining high nutritional standards. Now, Kimberly is here to share her top strategies for slashing your grocery bill, avoiding those sneaky supermarket traps, and getting the most out of your food budget, even if you have picky eaters or you have dietary restrictions at home. I am Brad Nelson, founder of Debt Free Dad. I paid off about $45,000 of debt, have been debt free now for more than 11 years outside of my mortgage. I've also been fortunate to help thousands of other people save and pay off tens of millions of dollars with the work that we do here at Debt Free Dad. So, hey, Kimberly, welcome to the Debt Free Dad podcast. So glad that you are joining us here today.
Oh, well, I'm grateful to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. This is going to be a fun conversation. As we just said before we hit the record button here, I think eating out and food costs in general are something that weigh really heavy on family budgets. And sometimes it can be challenging, to make sure we get everything that we need, especially getting good quality food with the budget that we have. And you're the expert in this area. So I love that you're going to be here. And I know you're going to be able to provide some amazing value to our listeners. But before we get to some of that expert advice and suggestions that you're going to give us, can you share, how did you get into this in helping people with, food preparation and being able to eat nutritious food on a budget?
Thank you. I was working in food security. My background isn't actually nutrition, despite the fact that we'll probably talk a bit about nutrition today. My background is food security, economic development, urban planning, and I did my master's degree specifically on the need to protect agricultural land so that our food prices don't become too expensive. And I did a lot of
Ah,
work in that area connecting, hey, if we keep putting housing on our best agricultural land, we're going to pay for it at the checkout.
yeah.
So I worked in rural communities that were struggling 10 years ago. And then I, in 2016, was diagnosed with advanced cancer.
Oh, my
And
goodness.
yeah, at that point, I had been in a house that I'd moved into with the man I'd just married and my two teenage children. And we borrowed the maximum amount for the mortgage. And I was earning 70% of our income. And suddenly I had to stop work. So
Oh, my
I
goodness.
went,
Okay.
I went from studying and advocating on food security to living it for us to keep the roof over our head. The only place, like a lot of families, that we could take the money from was our food bill. It's the largest discretionary part of our budget that most of us have. So I said, well, if I'm going to do this, how do I reduce our food costs to the lowest amount possible without it impacting on our health? I started living that. And then in 2023, I looked at the rising cost of living around the world. At that point, I was home getting over the latest round of chemotherapy. And I just started researching it more because the information, the things that we needed and what we could get away with in 2016, it was a little bit easier than now. I think what I was really wanting to find out is if I had to do it now when things are even tougher, could I have done so? And I didn't set out to write a book, but that's what it became.
It's interesting what happens in life, when you're faced against these obstacles and these challenges and new opportunities show up. And you kind of have a similar story to me. Like, I never had any goal of starting a podcast and talking about helping people get out of debt, but I struggled with it myself and people started asking me for help. So it's interesting that we both kind of have a similar path, just different topics. Can I just ask, just for the listeners, how cancer is good? Like
Oh,
we're all done?
I should, it's, I joke that we live in a world now where you can be, as I was twice, two different cancers, diagnosed with having an advanced cancer. First time around, it was leukemia. 2 years later, it was breast cancer. You can be diagnosed with advanced cancers these days if you're in an affluent country, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to shorten your life, but you're
Right.
going to have to learn how to live with it. And that means that your ability to go and work a 9 to 5 intense job, such as I was doing before, you become less reliable. So I've had to switch from doing, working for the government or whoever, to working consultancy work in small patches as I go. And I'm pretty well writing full time these days.
Wow, very cool. Awesome. Well, that's great news. So lay it on us, Kimberly. Like, how do we do this? What do you feel like for families? Now, you just mentioned like you guys were faced with a situation where you had to make some changes, you had to make some cuts. Food was a great place to start. I think it is for a lot of families. What do you feel is the most challenging part about that when families get started? Like, how do you coach people to focus on their food and still be able to eat well, but still cut costs? Like, where do we start with this?
I think the first place to start is to understand that food is more than nutrition. I joke that for 18 months, I was just seeing a periodic table every time I looked at a potato. But but honestly, the thing that you need to remember first is that if you're going through a stressful financial period, especially if it's suddenly been put upon you because of some other reason that's bigger than the financial problem, you need to stick together as a family. So this is a mental health journey. And I think food can be a wonderful way to bring the family together and to celebrate that you've still got the really good things in life. So I actually talk in my book about not cutting out sugar completely. It's not really a food, but it has a special place in small old-fashioned desserts, and still baking a cake with the kids, and still making a jelly so that you can watch the toddler experiment with jelly for the first time. Nobody should miss
Yeah.
out on that.
Right.
So I think that's where it begins. But once you've understood that there should be rituals and celebrations to bring you together on a regular basis, then you start getting down into the nutrition and monetary side of things. And my approach literally was, what is the most low cost way to get these 16 or 17 vitamins and minerals that we need? That's how deep I went, because to find out the lowest price that you can go, you really do need to look at it from that sort of, what's the best nutritional bang for my buck.
Right. And so what did you find in your experience when you started to look at that? Like, what are the best areas for people to save the most when it comes to at least, more nutritional food? Because one of the things I'll hear is like, it's more expensive to eat healthy. It's more expensive to be able to buy those foods. So how did you do this?
I think it's true that you could just fill yourself with ramen noodles and white rice and jam sandwiches using cheap bread. And I think a lot of people do that when times get tough. And so you feel full, but you're not actually getting the nutrition that you need. In fact,
Yeah.
all those foods I just listed have almost zero nutrition. A lot of people don't realize even those really cheap breads, cheap white breads, and you think, how did they make it for that price? They are so super processed that, with the exception perhaps of folate, you're not getting much out of it.
Right.
So you can be malnutritioned and overweight. So that's the first point I would make. And we're seeing increasing rates of malnutrition in places like the USA. In fact, we're talking now that 1 in 3 women in affluent countries has some form of iron deficiency. That's for women
Wow.
of childbearing age. So it's really important to be aware of the fact that you might feel okay, but if you're not covering that broad range of nutrition that you need, you could have underlying problems. And it's really, really important that you think carefully through it. Not all of us, I cannot afford to fill my plate with fruit and vegetables the way I used to, even though I know that's the best thing to do. So you have to look at strategies around, okay, if I can't fill the plate up, how do I still get that nutrition but go for more nutrient-dense foods so that you don't have to fill the plate?
Sure. And can you share, like, what are some of those foods that are still budget friendly, they'll help out families, but still will give you the nutrition that you're talking about?
I would start with understanding the idea that not all vegetables were created equal. You can put lettuce on your plate. It's good for you. But if you are really struggling financially, I'd sooner you had a sprinkle of parsley. It's much, much better for you, and it's extremely concentrated. So a handful of parsley is going to do you more good than a plate full of lettuce.
Interesting.
I would say capsicum over zucchini, though they both are good. I would say carrots. Carrots are one of those wonderful low-cost filling food. Carrot sticks for morning tea for the kids, brilliant. All things in moderation, but it's first you start by getting to know who the nutrient-dense superheroes are. I would say if there was only one idea that your listeners took away today, let it be that they respect the pulses. And by pulses, I mean dehydrated chickpeas, dehydrated split lentils, split peas, the sorts of Middle Eastern cuisine ideas. And you learn to bulk out your meals, your stews, your soups, your curries, your salads with these ingredients. They are superfoods in so many ways. In fact, chickpeas, which I think you guys might call garbanzo beans, I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. They have been identified by the World Health Organization as being one of the foods that we're going to see as a superhero food for food security in the future. So having access to a kilo bag of dehydrated chickpeas, there are so many things you can do with them. So you've got to learn to pre-soak them first, but once you get past that, they're a great food that covers so many of the things you need nutritionally at a very low price. You can feed an adult a fairly substantial meal for like 30 cents.
Wow.
And then, of course, milk powder, skim milk powder. I know it's not an exciting ingredient, but if you don't think of it just as the basis of milk, but also as a cooking ingredient, it's particularly good if you've got teenagers in the house that need large amounts of calcium. And remember too that women over 50 need large amounts of calcium too. So learning to cook, use skim milk powder to cook your vegetables, create protein shakes with extra skim milk powder. They're great. And I also strongly recommend your fish, especially the tinned sardines and other small boned fish. They are really, really good for you. In fact, when studies have been done on nutrient dense foods, in the top 500, when they were ranked, more than half of them were a species of fish.
Wow.
So fish is really good. And I would suggest that these smaller tinned varieties are actually really nutrient dense. And a lot of the foods that are the best dollar value are going to be dehydrated or frozen or in a can. So people think fresh is best, and yes, to some extent it is. But when you actually look at the nutrition concentration, we often find dehydrated foods in particular do a great job of capturing nutrition, and they're a lot less expensive.
Very interesting. Now, you have a book as well, and you're going to share. We're going to have a link in this in the show notes. So if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't keep up with all this, I'm writing it down. I got to figure out what I'm supposed to do. You have a book that kind of goes through all this too, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. We're going to be talking about that here in a second. But can you share a little bit more about the prep side of things? Because I think for families, now I know you mentioned make it more of a tradition and make it fun in the house, especially if you got kids involved, get them involved with the process. And for busy families and stuff, though, like what strategies would you recommend to busy families for food preparation? Because I feel like, I mean, I'll throw myself under the bus. It's probably where I fall off the wagon. It's like I love to cook. I love to eat at home, but the preparation part is the part that I kind of stink at, and then it comes time to eat and it's like, well, we didn't prepare as much food or the food that we wanted to prepare. And you find yourself throwing some things away because you didn't take that time. So what are some strategies for families to be able to do this, especially busy families?
Okay, busy families. I strongly recommend that as a family, you have half a day a week where for us, it was always a Sunday. the whole family pitches in. That's the afternoon usually, where the housework gets done, the vacuuming gets done, the laundry for the week ahead gets done, and
Yeah.
someone's on duty in the kitchen prepping meals and cleaning the kitchen after them. So learning to split up those jobs between family members according to where they're at, especially if you've got a child who's really interested in cooking, they might go, hey, can I do the prep this week? When they're a bit older, we would all get stuck in, and then whoever finished first would help the others, and none of us got to sit down till it was done. There was a lot of grumbling. I used to wear headphones and I'd be in the kitchen and happily doing food prep. That was my thing. And if I made a big mess, well, I was responsible to clean it up. But meantime, the other members of the household were getting into the other jobs that needed to be done for the week ahead. I think that making time to do the food prep is incredibly important. You can have a great life. You can have tasty meals. You can have homemade pizzas and beautiful pies and wonderful slow-cooked casseroles and curries that you're going to look forward to on the week ahead. But it's going to take a little bit of time.
Yeah.
And the most important message for anyone who wants to save money is time equals money equals time. You're actually going to have to make a decision which is going to be your priority. Yes, I can give you shortcuts in the book around people who are time poor. I actually have a plan for inner city bachelors who are going to university or leaving home for the first time. And it's a very simple prep that you do for 2 hours once a fortnight, but there's still prep. You save so much money, and it's not just that you make everything go further. When you're prepping, say, 2 pots on the stove and then taking all the scraps from that at the same time and making a vegetable stock, so there's no waste.
Right.
When you learn to do all that at the same time, it's not taking much more time than it would have to make one dish. You've just got 3 big pots instead of 1 small pot. And it just makes such a difference, because when the week ahead comes and you're really busy and you're tired and you might have fallen for the trap of junk food or takeaway food on the way
Yeah.
home,
Yeah.
you're going, no, I've got something waiting for me. I've got something that excites you. It might even just be a pasta sauce, and all you've got to do is cook the pasta. And it makes you feel good. And you think, I'm looking after myself. I'm looking after my family. It's sorted, and I'll probably eat quicker than if I went to a takeaway anyway.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so good. And you're so right. I think, it's like finances. If you want to get out of debt, if you want to improve your finances, you're going to have to make some sort of a time commitment to them. But the overall benefit of once you get out of debt and you improve your finances is so good. You have less stress, less worry. You're able to do more things, pay cash. And it's the same thing with eating. Take the time, and your family's going to be much healthier. You're going to be much healthier. And the benefits are just fantastic. You mentioned takeout food. Do you have any tips real quick to share? Because I think that happens for families. They still are going to go out. Is there anything that you have learned with a family with takeout food, or did you cut that out altogether in your process?
I never completely. What we did is there's a couple of things. Firstly, I'm a big believer, especially if you're going through a tough time, that you should get out of the house. It's a really important thing. So eating out, heck, at least once a week as a family, make a commitment to eat out. But what I'm going to suggest is that eating out doesn't mean that you pay for food. Eating out can mean that you take finger food to the park and you kick a ball
Okay.
around.
Yeah.
Eating out can mean there'll be beautiful places that you can go to that are in your community that get you out of the house. A picnic can be a beautiful opportunity for everyone. Living in Australia, I usually say, go to the beach.
Yeah.
So get out of the house, definitely. We had a regular thing that we would take finger food. I always had like pizza or something like that on a Friday night, and we would go out. And the kids really look forward to it. I think now that they're adults, they can look back and go, gee, I know they must have been doing it tough, but we had a great time.
Yeah.
So there are rituals that you do on a regular basis that I recommend, and one of them is getting out of the house. But it doesn't have to mean eating out at a restaurant. The other thing I've done is I'm a bit of a sucker for cafes. Cafes now for breakfast are our special occasion going out.
Very cool.
Yeah, that is, it's a birthday or Mother's Day or something like that. But what we do for our sort of a regular eat out is we go to bakeries and we just grab something takeaway. There's no eat in charges, which you can sometimes cop. And even that, I wouldn't even do that. I'd do that like once a month, maybe. That's what I'll do if I'm really caught out. The other thing I also do is I keep some takeaway cutlery in the car. And if I'm caught out, and I'll go to the supermarket and I'll buy something from a supermarket, it'll be a yogurt or something like that.
Yeah. So can you share, I mean, obviously where you save the money is learning how to shop right too. And you have to be mindful. And what are some ways to not get caught up in the supermarket trips and the things that they get you to spend more money? So can you share some feedback with our listeners about when they're actually shopping? What are some don'ts? Don't do this because you're spending more money.
Yeah, I think the first thing is to understand that when you go to the supermarket, you are dealing with a multinational that has this huge range of resources that has been set up to create psychological tricks and traps in that supermarket. So when you go up and down those aisles, you are literally running an obstacle course. And the whole thing that they're trying to do is to get you to spend more than you intended and to buy items that you didn't intend to buy. I mean, we've all been there. You need to buy milk. So you get to the supermarket, you get through the turnstiles, and you have to go the longest distance to get to the other end where the milk is. Along the way, you bought a chocolate bar because the chocolate bar aisle was wider than the other aisles, and there were a couple of items that were so cheap you were going to save money by spending money, and so on and so forth. So if you can shop online, at least find out what the prices are. But I strongly recommend having a click and collect or whatever to just go and pick up the items already purchased. But if you're going through the supermarket, understand that they're going to try to trick you up. See it as a game. I talk about gamifying the experience. I think that when you're struggling, you can feel a little bit powerless. So my suggestion is that traveling through that supermarket, see it as a game of you pitched up against the supermarket. They're going to try and trick you up. And just like playing Mario Kart or something, you are there to stick to your list, stick to your budget. And when you get to the checkout and you've managed to do so, see it as a scoreboard 1-0 in your favor. That's what I call gamifying the experience. It's using behavioral economics to beat them at their own game.
Yeah, so true. I read a statistic not too long ago, something like Shopify, I think, put it out. And it said 50% of grocery is all spent on impulse and emotional spending.
Yes.
That's just unbelievable to me. But yeah, some fantastic tips. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners when it comes to whether it be food prep or nutritional eating, or is there anything else that you'd like to share with them that you think would be valuable?
Thank you. Yes. Shop weekly, think 5 weekly. And the reason I say this is we've just been talking about the supermarket psychological tricks that they do. Particularly when you're dealing with shelf-stable goods, but across the whole supermarket, you have what you call your regular cyclical specials or discounts. So you might have a particular coffee that you like to buy, but it seems to always be just a little bit more than you want to spend, and then suddenly it's discounted. And over time, you'll find that there is sort of a pattern of 4 to 8 weeks. A lot of regular items will become on special. So learn to think when you do a weekly shop, okay, I've got a small percentage of my budget where I think over a 5-week period. So if there's something that I know I'm going to use in the next 5 weeks, I have a little bit of room in my budget to purchase it now. Then when I get to the point, say 3 weeks' time, when that item was going to have to be purchased, I have a little bit more room in my budget for something else in that 5-week list. Most regular items will become discounted to some extent. The idea is it's all to do with increasing your impulse buying. So learn to think 5-weekly, and more of your food items will be at the discounted price.
Awesome. Great tip. Kimberley, now you mentioned their book. Can you tell our listeners where you can find your book, or maybe find more information about how you're helping people?
First off, it's called How Low Can You Go? Nutritious Meals from $50 per person per week. In fact, you can do much better than $50, but I'm allowing for vast regional variation. And it is available on Amazon. You can also find out more information, or if you've got any questions, you can contact me through kimberleygillen.com. That's Ley for Kimberley. Or you can find me on Facebook and LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, Kimberley, thanks so much. We'll have the link to the book in the show notes as well. As long as any other links that you want to provide, we'll make sure we put those in the show notes so people can easily contact you if they have questions. This is a big topic. I think an area that a lot of us struggle with, a lot of us could do a lot better in, and we could save a lot of extra money every single month and use that money to save or get further out of debt or pay for other things that are happening in life. Some great tips, Kimberley. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Brad.
Thanks for joining us on today's show, and we will see you guys on the next episode. Take care.